ಹಾಯ್ ಹಲೋ ಪ್ರೀತಿಯ ವಿದ್ಯಾರ್ಥಿ ಮಿತ್ರರೇ, ಪುನರ್ವಿ ಸಂಸ್ಕಾರ್ಗೆ ಸ್ವಾಗತ ಸುಸ್ವಾಗತ. ವಿದ್ಯಾರ್ಥಿ ಮಿತ್ರರೇ, ಈ ಒಂದು ವಿಡಿಯೋದಲ್ಲಿ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಸೆಕೆಂಡ್ PUC ಇಂಗ್ಲೀಷ್ ವಿಷಯಕ್ಕೆ ಸಂಬಂಧಿಸಿದ ಹಾಗೆ 4 ಅಂಕದ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗಳು ಮತ್ತು 6 ಅಂಕದ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗಳನ್ನು ಅಂದರೆ 4 ಮತ್ತು 6 ಮಾರ್ಕ್ಸ್ ಕ್ವಶನ್ಸ್ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಆನ್ಸರ್ಸ್ ಸಮೇತ ನಾವು ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ಕ್ವಶನ್ಸ್ಗಳನ್ನು ನಾವು ಈ ಒಂದು ವಿಡಿಯೋದಲ್ಲಿ ಅಪ್ಲೋಡ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೇವೆ. ವಿದ್ಯಾರ್ಥಿ ಮಿತ್ರರೇ, ಈ ಒಂದು ವಿಡಿಯೋದಿಂದ ನೀವು ಎಷ್ಟು ಮಾರ್ಕ್ಸ್ಗಳನ್ನು ತೆಗಿಬೋದು ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನು ಹೇಳೋದಾದರೆ ವಿದ್ಯಾರ್ಥಿ ಮಿತ್ರರೇ, ಟೋಟಲ್ಲಾಗಿ 32 ಮಾರ್ಕ್ಸು 4 ಅಂಕಗಳಿಂದ ಬಂತು ಅಂತಂದರೆ ಅದೇ ರೀತಿಯಾಗಿ 6 ಮಾರ್ಕ್ಸ್ ಟೋಟಲಾಗಿ 40 ಅಂಕಗಳನ್ನು ನೀವು ಇಂಗ್ಲೀಷ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಈಸಿಯಾಗಿ ತೆಗೆದುಕೊಳ್ಬಹುದು. ವಿದ್ಯಾರ್ಥಿ ಮಿತ್ರರೇ, ನಾವೇನು ಇವಾಗ ಅಪ್ಲೋಡ್ ಮಾಡಿರ್ತೀವಿ ಸೊ ಅದನ್ನು ಗಮನ ಇಟ್ಟು ಓದ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ. ಸೊ ಅದೇ ರೀತಿಯಾಗಿ ನಿಮಗೆ ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಸಂಬಂಧಿಸಿದಂತಹ PDF ಏನಾದರೂ ಬೇಕು ಅಂತಂದರೆ ನೀವು ನಮ್ಮ ಫೋನ್ಪೇ ನಂಬರ್ಗೆ ಕೇವಲ 10 ರೂಪೀಸನ್ನು ನೀವು ನಮಗೆ ಕಳಿಸ್ಕೊಟ್ರೆ ನಾವು ನಿಮಗೆ ಇದರ ಒಂದು PDF ನಿಮ್ಮ ಒಂದು ವಾಟ್ಸಪ್ ನಂಬರ್ಗೆ ನಾವು ಸೆಂಡ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೇವೆ. ನಮ್ಮ ಒಂದು ವಾಟ್ಸಪ್ ನಂಬರನ್ನು ಡಿಸ್ಕ್ರಿಪ್ಷನ್ ಬಾಕ್ಸ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಹಾಕಿರ್ತೇವೆ. ಸೊ ಆ ನಂಬರ್ಗೆ ನೀವು ವಾಟ್ಸಪ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಸ್ಕ್ರೀನ್ಶಾಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಒಂದು ಹೆಸರನ್ನು ಹಾಕಿ ಕಳಿಸ್ತು ಅಂತಂದರೆ ನಾವು ಇದರ ಒಂದು PDFನೂ ಕೂಡ ನಾವು ನಿಮಗೆ ಕಳಿಸ್ಕೊಡ್ತೇವೆ. ಸೊ ಅದಕ್ಕಿಂತ ಮುಂಚೆ ಮೊದಲು ವಿಡಿಯೋನ ನೋಡಿ ನಿಮಗೆ ಇಷ್ಟ ಆಯಿತು ಅಂತಂದರೆ ನೀವು PDFನ ಕೇಳಬಹುದು. ವಿದ್ಯಾರ್ಥಿ ಮಿತ್ರರೇ, ಇದು ನಮ್ಮ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಯತ್ನಕ್ಕೆ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಬೆಂಬಲ ಅಷ್ಟೇ. ಬನ್ನಿ ಈಗ ವಿಡಿಯೋನ ಶುರು ಮಾಡೋಣ. ಮೊದಲನೆಯ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ, ಡಿಸ್ಕ್ರೈಬ್ ದ ಟಾಯ್ ಕಿಂಗ್ಡಮ್ ಮೊನಾಕೋ. ದ ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಈಸ್ ದ ಶಾರ್ಟ್ ಸ್ಟೋರಿ ಟು ಡಿಯರ್ presents the case of an offender. It satirizes how the king and the ministers take the impractical measure to punish the criminal and how the criminal takes advantage of the procedural lapses. Near the borders of France and Italy on the shore of the Mediterranean Sea, there was a teeny kingdom called Monaco. There was about 7,000 population in that kingdom, but there was a real kinglet. He had a palace, the countries, the ministers, the bishop, the generals and the army of 60 men. There were also taxes on tobacco, wine, spirits, and a poll tax as in any other country. But the prince found it hard to maintain the countries and other officials. Without the special revenue that came from a gaming house, people played roulette in the gaming house. It was the only gaming house left in Europe. So the keeper of the gaming house got more profit and he paid a large sum to the prince. All the other European countries had forbidden such gambling houses because they did so much harm to the people, but the Prince of Monaco remained with a monopoly of the business. Second question, how was the case of murder conducted in the toy kingdom? The short story to dear presents the case of an offender. It satirizes how the king and the ministers take the impractical measures to punish the criminal and how the criminal takes advantage of the procedural lapses. A few years ago, a murder was committed in the toy kingdom. The people of toy kingdom always lived peacefully and such a thing had never happened before, but when it so happened, the judges assembled and conducted the case in the most judicious manner. There were judges, the prosecutors, the jurymen, and the barristers. They argued and judged At last, they condemned the criminal to death as the law directed. Next, they submitted the sentence to the prince. After reading the sentence, he agreed to it and ordered to execute him. Third question. What obstacle did the king confront to imprison the criminal? Dear students, ಈ ಮೂರನೇ ಕ್ವೆಶ್ಚನ್ಗೆ ಆನ್ಸರ್ಸ್ನ ನೋಡೋದಕ್ಕಿಂತ ಮುಂಚೆ ಇನ್ನೂ ಕೂಡ ನಮ್ಮ ಚಾನಲ್ಗೆ ಸಬ್ಸ್ಕ್ರೈಬ್ ಮಾಡಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂತಂದರೆ ಸಬ್ಸ್ಕ್ರೈಬ್ ಮಾಡಿ. ಈ ನಮ್ಮ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಯತ್ನ ಸಾರ್ಥಕ ಆಗಬೇಕು ಅಂತಂದರೆ ಈ ಒಂದು ವಿಡಿಯೋನ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಎಲ್ಲ ಫ್ರೆಂಡ್ಸ್ಗಳಿಗೂ ಕೂಡ ಮರಿದೇನೆ ಶೇರ್ ಮಾಡಿ. ಹಾಗೆಯೇ ಮತ್ತೆ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೇನೆ, ಇದರ ಒಂದು PDF ಫೈಲ್ ಏನಾದರೂ ಬೇಕು ಅಂತಂದರೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಒಂದು ಫೋನ್ಪೇ ನಂಬರ್ನ ಮತ್ತು ಗೂಗಲ್ ಪೇ ನಂಬರ್ನ ಡಿಸ್ಕ್ರಿಪ್ಷನ್ ಬಾಕ್ಸ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಹಾಕಿರ್ತೇನೆ. ಸೊ ಆ ಒಂದು ಏನು ಫೋನ್ಪೇ ಅಥವಾ ಗೂಗಲ್ ಪೇಗೆ ನಂಬರ್ನ ಟೈಪ್ ಮಾಡಿ. ಸೊ ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ನೀವು 10 ರೂಪೀಸ್ನ ನೀವು ನಮಗೆ ಕಳಿಸ್ಕೊಟ್ರೆ ನಾವು ನಿಮಗೆ PDF ಕಳಿಸ್ಕೊಡ್ತೀವಿ. ಇದು ನಮ್ಮ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನಕ್ಕೆ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಬೆಂಬಲ ಅಷ್ಟೇ. ಈಗ ಮತ್ತೆ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಯನ್ನು ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಹೋಗೋಣ. ಮೂರನೇ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಯನ್ನು, ವಾಟ್ ಆಬ್ಸ್ಟಕಲ್ ಡಿಡ್ ದ ಕಿಂಗ್ ಕನ್ಫ್ರಂಟ್ ಟು ಇಂಪ್ರೆಷನ್ ದ ಕ್ರಿಮಿನಲ್? ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಇಸ್ the short story to Dear presents the case of an offender. It strategizes of the king and the ministers take the impractical measures to punish the criminal and how the criminal takes advantages of the procedural lapses. The ministers decided to offer the death sentence to a life imprisonment because they could not afford borrowing guillotine from other countries. They thought that if they alter punishment, it would come cheaper and also enable the king to show his mercy on the criminal. The king agreed to it and the matter was arranged, but they had an obstacle to imprison the criminal, that there was no suitable prison for a man sentenced for life imprisonment. There was a small lockup where people were sometimes kept temporarily, but there was no strong prison fit for permanent use. However, they managed to find a place that would serve their purpose and they put him there. A guard was appointed to watch the criminal and to fetch food for him from the palace kitchen. Fourth question. How did the criminal lead his life after his release from the prison? The answer is, the short story to Dear presents the case of an offender. It stresses how the king and the ministers take the impractical measures to punish the criminal and how the criminal takes advantages of the procedural lapses. The criminal did not agree to leave the prison, so they offered 600 francs as a yearly pension to get rid of him. Thus, they settled the matter, receiving 1/3 of his annuity in advance. The criminal left the kingdom. He emigrated and settled across the frontier, where he bought a bit of land. He started market gardening and lived comfortably. He would always go at proper time to draw his pension. After receiving his pension, he would go to the gambling tables to try his luck. He would bet 2 or 3 francs. Sometimes he won and sometimes he lost. Then he would return home. Thus, he led a peaceful life somehow. He was lucky not to have committed the crime in a country which did not mind expense to cut a man's head off or to keep him in prison for life. Fifth question. Trace the childhood experiences that shaped the author's interest in ecology. The answer is, everything I need to know I learned in the forest. Is it though provoking essay. It speaks of the role of nature in human life. The writer feels we have to be harmony with the nature. The author recounts that her ecological journey started in the forest of Himalayas. Her father was a forest conservator and her mother became a farmer. She learned about ecology from the Himalaya forest and ecosystems. The songs and poems her mother composed for them were about trees, forest and India's forest civilizations. Her involvement in the ecology movement began with the Chipko, a non-violent response to the deforestation that was taking place in the Himalayan region. Sixth question. How did the women led by Bachni Devi put up resistance to felling of trees? The answer is everything I need to know I learned in the forest is a thought-provoking essay. It speaks of the role of nature in human life and the life harmony with nature in the light of the writer's personal experiences. The author recollects that the protest led by Bachni Devi was one of the dramatic Chipko actions that took place in the Himalayan village of Advani. A village woman named Bachni Devi led protest against her own husband who had obtained a contract to cut trees. When officials arrived at the forest to cut trees, the women held up lighted lanterns although it was broad daylight. The forester asked the women to explain why they carried lanterns. The women replied that they had come to teach the officers forestry. The angry forester told that they felled trees for the profit, resin, and timber. The women sang back that forests bear soil, water, and pure air, indicating to preserve the earth and everything the earth bears. Seventh question. Write a note on Navadanya Farm. Everything I need to know I learned in the forest is a thought-provoking essay. It speaks the role of nature in human life and the life harmony with nature in the light of the writer's personal experiences. To practice and promote biodiversity, intensive farming, the author started saving seeds from farmer fields. Then they realized that they needed a farm for demonstration and training. The Navadanya Farm was started in the Doon Valley. They conserve and grow 630 varieties of rice, 150 varieties of wheat, and hundreds of other spices. Working with farmers, they have set up more than 100 community seed banks across India and saved more than 3,000 rice varieties. They also help farmers make a transition from fossil fuel and chemical based monoculture to biodiversity ecological systems nourished by the sun and the soil. It helps them produce more food and nutrition per acre. Next, eighth question. Question number 8. What are the views of Tagore and importance of forest mentioned? Tapovan. How does Tagore's essay Tapovan bring out the influence the environment on the Indian civilization? The answer is everything I need to know I learned in the forest is a thought-provoking essay. It speaks of the role of nature in human life and the life in harmony with nature in the light of the writer's personal experiences. In the essay Tapovan, Tagore writes that forest is the source of material and intellectual regeneration of Indian civilization. India's best India's best ideas have come where man was in communion with trees, rivers and lakes away from the crowd. The peace of the forest has helped the intellectual evaluation of man. Our diverse culture has been influenced by the diverse process of renewal of life in the forest. The varies from spices to spices, the unifying principle of life in diversity became the democratic principle of Indian civilization. Diversity without unity becomes the source of conflicts and contest. Unity without diversity becomes the ground for external control. We are united with nature though our relationship with the forest. The forest teaches us union and compassion as forest is not just the source of knowledge and freedom but also the source of beauty and joy, of harmony and perfection. The forest also teaches us enoughness. The principles of equity teach us how to enjoy the gifts of nature without exploitation and accumulation. No spices in a forest take the share of another spices, but every spices lives in cooperation with others. Question number 9. Why do you think Laura was a regular visitor to the park? What makes you think so? The answer is A Sunny Morning is a one-act play that comically presents the meeting of two once upon a time lovers in a park. When Donna Lara enters the park, she says that she is so glad to be there. She had feared that her seat would be occupied. This shows that she is a regular visitor to the park. She occupies her regular seat and lets her maid Petra go and chat with the guard of the park as he would be waiting for her. Lara brings breadcrumbs for the birds in the park. She throws the breadcrumbs to the birds and enjoys the sight of the birds having them. She knows about each bird and their features. This shows that Lara is a regular visitor to the park. Question number 10. Describe the fictitious story spanned by Donna Lara. Describe as to how Donna Lara portrays her dear friends, the Silver Maiden, Death do Gonzalo. A Sunny Morning, the answer is A Sunny Morning is a one-act play that comically presents the meeting of two once upon a time lovers in a park. Donna Laura and Don Gonzalo meet in the park as strangers. They get annoyed with each other for a few silly matters, but as the conversation progresses, they become friendly with each other. When Don Gonzalo mentioned about Valencia, Maricela and the Silver Maiden, Laura recognizes him as the lover of her young days. From her reaction, he too recognizes her as his beloved. But they do not want to reveal their identity. They start making up stories about themselves to hide their true selves. Donna Lara spins a story that the Silver Maiden was her friend. She narrates that after Gonzalo's cousin left Valencia, her friend, waited eagerly for his letters, but she did not receive any letter one day. Later one day, she left her house for the bay, where her lover had risked his life. She wrote his name on the sand and sat upon the rock. The waves crept up to the rock and rose with a boom and swept her out to the sea. The fishermen often tell that the name that she had written was washed away much later after her death. Thus Laura excels in her narration. Question number 11. Describe the scene where Donna, Lara and Don Gonzalo recognize each other. A sunny morning is one act play that comically presents the meeting of two once upon a time lovers in a park. Donna, Laura and Don Gonzalo meet in the park as strangers. They get annoyed with each other for a few silly matters. Later, he shares the bench with Laura. They share a pinch of snuff, read lines from the book together, and become friendly with each other. Laura is surprised to hear that he is a native of Valencia. She then describes about Maricela, a villain in Valencia. Gonzalo is started at the name of the villa. He tells that the villa was familiar to him and the most beautiful woman, Laura Lorneth, had lived there. On hearing her own name, Laura is startled. She tells that the beautiful woman, who was called the Silver Maiden, was her friend. Gonzalo too hides his identity and tells that her lover was his cousin. When they narrate their stories, they silently recognize each other. Question number 12. Give an account of Valencia, Maricela, and the Silver Maiden. The answer is: A sunny morning is a one-act play that comically presents the meeting of two once upon a time lovers in a park. Donna, Laura, and Don Gonzalo meet in the park as strangers. They get annoyed with each other for a few silly matters, but as the conversation progresses, they become friendly with each other. When Don Gonzalo mentions about Valencia, Marcela and the Silver Maiden, Laura recognizes him as her lover of her young days. Valencia was the native place of Gonzalo, not far from Valencia. There was a beautiful villa named Maricela. It was near the sea. It was hidden away among the lemon and orange trees. The most beautiful woman lived in the villa. She was known as the Silver Maiden in her locality. The Silver Maiden was none other than Donna Lara. Gonzalo was her long during their young days. Though they recognize each other, they do not reveal it. Question number 13. What description does the narrator give about the old man? The answer is: The Gardener is a short story that provides insights into the strange human relations with all their complexities and dimensions of rivalry. The narrator met an old man by chance. When the narrator met the old man, he was standing in a coconut grove near Chennarayapatna. His eyes were full of strange memories and native intelligence. He was tall and his hair had gone grey. He had long beak like nose and strong muscular arms. In one hand, he carried the spade to work in the coconut grove. He tucked a newspaper under his arm. He worked in the coconut grove. As a laborer, he was also an overseer and philosopher as well. After walking hundreds of miles, he had come to that garden and had got a job. Question number 14. Describe the meeting between the old man and owner's wife. The answer is The Gardener is a short story that provides insights into the strange human relations with all their complexities and dimensions of rivalry. After the arrival of the old man, there was a lot of change in the attitude of the owner. The owner's wife is worried about him. One day, the old man met her and behaved as if he knew all about her problem. He smiled at her and brought down tender coconuts from a nearby tree for her. He sat on the embankment of the well. She too sat next to him. It was evening and the sun rays were reaching the walls of the well through the leaves of coconut, mango and jackfruit trees. Then the old man began to narrate the story of rivalry between Tamanna and Basavaya. Question number 15. What measures did Tamanna adopt to humiliate Basavaya? Or give an account of strategies used by Tamanna to destroy Basavaya, or how did Tamanna react to Basavaya's encroachment of his land? The answer is The Gardener is a short story that provides insights into the strange human reactions with all their complexities and dimensions of rivalry. When Basavaya acquired Tamanna's land forcibly, the supporters of Tamanna advised him to take the matter to the police or seek justice in the court of law. His supporters were also ready to attack Basavaya to get his land back. But Tamanna was in search a method that could destroy Basavaya completely. He got the idea of composing all his experiences in the form of ballads and singing them. To compete with Tamanna, Basavaya also tried to sing but he could not. He performed his agricultural tasks more seriously. Tamanna's reputation spread all around. Tamanna's ballads revealed cruelty and manners of Basavaya. His poems were admired by the scholars. Critics translated his poems into other languages. Basavaya was humiliated and helplessly watched this. He acquired more and more land of Tamanna, but Tamanna did not pay attention to Basavaya activities. Art had become his life. He was felicitated as the best poet of his times. Question number 16. How does the old man end his story? The Gardener is The answer is The Gardener is a short story that provides insights into the strange human relations with all their complexities and dimensions of rivalry. From the beginning of his narration, the old man tries to distance himself from the story. He also tries to give the impressions that he might have heard the story somewhere or he might have read somewhere, but at the end he admits to his owner's wife that himself is Tamanna in the story. Analyzing how strange human nature could be, he says that her husband is flourishing as a rich man. He is not willing to listen to any advice, Man is so complicated that till the day of his death he goes on living for some revenge or the other, facing one challenge or the other. Thus, the old man concludes his story and again requests his owner's wife to assume that he did not tell her anything. Before leaving, he tells her that he has to go to Lokia's house to see his bedridden child. ವಿದ್ಯಾರ್ಥಿ ಮಿತ್ರರೇ, ಇದಿಷ್ಟು ನಿಮ್ಮ ಮಿಡ್ ಟರ್ಮ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಮ್ಗೆ ಕೇಳಲಾಗುವಂಥ 4 ಮತ್ತು 6 ಅಂಕದ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗಳು ಮತ್ತು ಉತ್ತರಗಳಾಗಿದೆ. ಸೊ ನಿಮಗೆ ಇದರ ಒಂದು PDF ಬೇಕು ಅಂತಂದರೆ ಫೋನ್ಪೇ ನಂಬರ್ ಮತ್ತು ಗೂಗಲ್ ಪೇ ನಂಬರ್ನ ಡಿಸ್ಕ್ರಿಪ್ಷನ್ ಬಾಕ್ಸ್ನೆಲ್ಲ ಹಾಕಿದ್ದೇನೆ. ಹಾಗೆಯೇ ನಮ್ಮ ಇನ್ಸ್ಟಾಗ್ರಾಮ್, ಟೆಲಿಗ್ರಾಮ್ ಲಿಂಕ್ನು ಕೂಡ ಹಾಕಿದ್ದೇನೆ, ಬರೀತೇನೆ, ಫಾಲೋ ಮಾಡಿ. ನಿಮಗೆ ಈ ವಿಡಿಯೋ ಸಹಾಯ ಆಗಿದರೆ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಎಲ್ಲ ಫ್ರೆಂಡ್ಸ್ಗಳಿಗೂ ಕೂಡ ಶೇರ್ ಮಾಡಿ. ನೀವು ಫೋನ್ಪೇ, ಗೂಗಲ್ ಪೇ ಮಾಡಿದ ತಕ್ಷಣ ಸ್ಕ್ರೀನ್ಶಾಟ್ ತೆಗೆದು ನಮಗೆ ವಾಟ್ಸಪ್ ಮಾಡಿ, ನಾವು ನಿಮಗೆ PDF ಫೈಲ್ನ ಕಳಿಸ್ಕೊಡ್ತೀವಿ. ಸಂಪೂರ್ಣವಾಗಿ ವಿಡಿಯೋನ ನೋಡಿದ್ದಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ಧನ್ಯವಾದಗಳು. ನಿಮಗೆ ಇನ್ಯಾವುದಾದ್ರೂ ನೋಟ್ಸ್ಗಳು ಬೇಕು ಅಥವಾ ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ಕ್ವಶನ್ಸ್ ಬೇಕು, ಯಾವ ಸಬ್ಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಕಮೆಂಟ್ ಬಾಕ್ಸ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಕಮೆಂಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ. ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ವೆರಿ ಮಚ್.